Okay, guys, I want to give you each a brief moment to introduce yourselves, everything you do. We have 3 people with incredibly different backgrounds, but so important to the foundations of football. Dr. Manuel?
Hello, good morning. I'm very happy to be here. I am an orthopedic surgeon. I am the head of orthopedic surgery at Olympia Medical Center and Hospital La Luz. And for the last 30 years, I've been doing sports orthopedic surgery, taking care of many pro athletes, including soccer players and Olympic gymnasts. And I'm a consultant for many Spanish federations. And I'm really happy to be here with you all.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Anita Asante. I'm a former England international, played for England 71 times, played for clubs like Arsenal, Chelsea, Aston Villa. Today, I'm a broadcaster across Sky, BBC, TNT. I also coached and have coached with England women's under-23s.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Khalid Alaraifi. I am the Chief Experience Officer at Misk City, which is the first non-profit city in the world. I've spent the last decade working in sport in general, and more specifically in football. Happy to be here and to be amongst the prestigious panelists.
Thank you so much, guys. I want to start with what foundations mean today to each of us. So foundations is that buildings and programs, belief systems, values. We have a doctor here, former footballer, someone who's leading in Saudi sport. I think foundations can mean something different for each of us. So,
should I start? From a medical and trauma perspective, foundation for me is both physical and philosophical. It goes far beyond programs and structures. For me, foundations means considering injury prevention, patient well-being, and also mental health. They should be embedded as a core value in the culture of soccer. We sometimes forget that behind the athlete there is a person. And imagine a club that is investing millions in building a nice training camp, but ignores nutrition, sleep, mental health. They are probably building on a shaky land. It is very important to really care about the player, the person.
Yeah, just to jump off Dr. Manuel there, I think for me, foundations are the basis upon which everything can be built on. So whether that's the infrastructure or the buildings, the structure, is it designed with everybody in mind? Is it to include everybody? Is it going to allow people to feel that they get access? And every kind of foundation that you build, every single decision related to that, can determine what direction and how far it grows and expands, or if it excludes people. So for me, foundations are just the starting point of something you can grow and build and can evolve with time and change. And for me, my experience with football, that has been the case because the game has shifted and changed and crossed so many different kind of cultural perceptions over the years that it has grown to allow people to gain more access, more opportunities, and things from there on forth. So, yeah, foundations are just the basis of how we grow and build everything.
I agree with Dr. Manuel on the philosophical part. We believe that foundations today are a set of systems, beliefs, and values, as well as an environment and a platform that nurture potential, regardless of the type of foundation. So it definitely does not just come down to the content or the offerings or the programs of that foundation. And at Misk City, we follow the same approach. And Misk ecosystem in general, we capitalize and we invest a long-term investment in youth. And you can see that in our infrastructure, in our programs, in our content. So the approach is different when you think of it that way. When you have a human-centric approach, that is different than just develop any program. And you can take everything I said and apply it to any sport, more specifically football, when you have that in mind, it changes the outcome and it maximizes the impact of any foundation.
Perfect. I think to follow on that, talking about grassroots to top sport and even going into all that Saudi is doing, if we say football begins at grassroots, are we truly giving players something to grow from or just somewhere to start? And how do we make those environments that are creating opportunity and belonging and not just producing talent? I'm curious your opinion on that one.
Nice. So in Misk City, grassroots is a big part of what we do as an ecosystem as a whole. We have around 9 pitches throughout the city already active, and 2 of which are FIFA certified. We have the number of students in Riyadh School Academy, which is a Misk subsidiary, has tripled over the last year, and they have a partnership with Real Madrid Foundation as well to basically capitalize on the experience and legacy of Real Madrid. And you take that and you reflect it on the programming that are continuously happening. For example, we have what we call Misk Wadi Sports with over 2,000 athletes. We started 3 years ago with around 300, and now the number exceeds 2,000. So you take that and you build it on what we said previously about foundations and the way we should approach a foundation. You guarantee positive results and talents that are well taken care of emotionally and physically across all levels.
Yeah, I think for me, grassroots is the entry point, so it's both. It's the start, it's the beginning of the introduction to football and the journey for young people, but it only becomes something that grows into something elite if there's a purpose behind it and there's structures around it to support that development into football. Whether that is, education, mentorship, coaching opportunities, pathways into the elite game, then it's only ever just grassroots football. But if it's founded upon kind of creating structures so that people can fulfill their potential, take the opportunity, but fulfill their potential to develop and go further in the game, then it becomes more than that. And so, it's the beginning is the easiest part. Long-term investment is what drives that growth and that retention of players and the opportunities for them to actually see that beginning stage as a pathway that they can go on to in terms of a career.
For me, grassroots is not only the entry point for soccer, but it's also a time for the player where they develop long-lasting habits, and also so for me it's very important that the player learns to communicate with the doctors at that time. In many cases, they try to hide their problems. And I think that if we train them in communicating with the doctors about their problems and learning about how to prevent injuries, creating an environment of inclusion and confidence, that's going to be very helpful for his future. So it's a very important part for a player, developing this relation with the medical team when they are very, very young. This creates very good habits and probably shorter medical bills in the future.
I think my challenge to that is, obviously, I'm talking from the women's football perspective, is grassroots is often reliant upon volunteers, community, parents, and people that use their time to try and support young people. So, as I said before, if those foundations aren't created with not just supplying the actual action of playing the sport itself, the game itself, but providing that long-term vision for support and investment and development around the structure of the game, which, as you said, Dr. Manuel, like doctors and medical advice, nutritional advice, sleep advice from when they're young, so that they do build those habits, then of course they have a greater chance of being successful the further down they go. But at grassroots level, we know it's really disjointed. It's quite difficult in terms of finding the right funding or support to really cultivate all the other sides of the game. So, it's great. That's what we want in football. But I think, especially for young girls in particular, that is the challenge, is that they don't always get that medical advice or treatment much early at the beginning point, which I said is the entry point. So, and that comes from simple things, even like we talk about the menstrual cycle today, and we almost take it for granted at the professional elite level now, but we know for a fact that we're losing girls at the ages of 14 and 15 because of, taboos around menstrual cycles and not having the right facilities from a basic point of view in terms of where they can go to, use the toilet facilities and things like that. So reverting back to the very first question, when we build things in principle with everybody in mind, then we can start to actually resource people in the right ways so that they can go on to develop with all the tools that they need to be successful.
Yeah, I think it's a sports education issue to start with, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I also think that the environment should help the player to have an environment to grow, even if he's not an outstanding athlete at that time. Because I have seen some players that have been rejected from their clubs when they were young, and eventually they won the Ballon d'Or. And because at that time he was not tall enough, and they didn't think he was going to be a great player, but he had the confidence to continue growing. That's very important, because we will miss talent if we discharge players at that early age. So it's very important to have an adequate environment for the player to grow. That's, I think, it's important.
Yeah, I think as a former player also you can speak on that, right? Like my personal experience in sports as well, the environment is key into that. Also environment with family, culture, all of these pieces, it really plays into how long you're going to stay in the game.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, that is the foundations upon which players find that internal resilience to push through even disappointment. But ultimately, everything that we do, whether you're an athlete or otherwise, is about purpose, the why. Why do you do it? Why is it important? Why do you put yourself through that training session that, tomorrow you're screaming because you're absolutely knackered and it hurts, but you go back and you do it again and again and again. It always goes back to the why. So for me, that's the key, is always, when I played on teams where we wanted to build success, the winning is just a part of the things that you do, but it's the wider purpose. And just to give an example, obviously, take the Lionesses from 2022 Euros, winning the first major tournament. There was a wider purpose attached to why they were trying to compete at that stage and win something. They wanted to shift cultural perceptions about women's football. They wanted to make sure that our government would start to actually invest in youth girls football across schools and education. So there was a wider purpose tied to what they are doing, and that was the emotional link that bonded the team to fight for each other on the pitch, but I think also to get the rest of the society and fans to follow that kind of journey as well.
And just to build on that, I think it's a combination of three main elements. One is talent, which is mandatory. Number two is knowledge, which is also important. Number three is the platform that nurtures that knowledge and talent. And whenever you see any player, even today, I'm sure you can tell that this player grew up and played in a different environment than the other one. You can tell that player X had more talent than player Y, and this does not mean that player X excels in his or her career better than Y. And that's where knowledge plays a big role, as well as the environment and the programs that they've been through, their wellness and their fitness. It all adds up.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think also, personally, culture plays a big piece in this as well, connected to purpose, right? So my next question, what role does culture play in the foundations of the game? How are we using the game to express identity, shift perception, and inspire the next generation?
Yeah, I mean, for me, culture is the bridge that brings people together across different languages, backgrounds, education. It is literally the bridge that can connect and unite so many people. And I think that as athletes, you kind of want a reflection of your culture. From fan perspective, you want a reflection of your culture reflected on the pitch as well. So you get those shared stories from players in terms of their journey to football or their shared interests and passions. I think that's how you also engage spectators and fans. That's how sometimes they come into the game, and it might not even start from a love of the game itself, because people are really the point of which, or the point of contact that really, connect people as well. So yeah, I think culture plays a massive part, and it kind of transcends all different demographics, intersections of society, and it shows you that the values and the identity piece can be hugely impactful through football, because that's how you get people to actually see that, you might not like, I don't know, something about a particular team or whatever, but then you hear a story about a player and the journey they've been on to get there, or they represent, like myself, the diaspora of West Africa and West African girls. Suddenly West African girls see me represent a club like Arsenal, which is global, and they have something to be inspired by. That's the strength, I think, and power of culture.
There's that football culture itself, the sport itself, and then also the cultures we bring into it. But it's amazing what football and representation can just do. Any sport, but the representation on the pitch of just who someone is without even saying anything. It's just showing up, being excellent at what you do. And I think content ties into that also.
Well, I agree with everything you said. And I do believe that football is culture on its own. And I'll speak about Saudi Arabia as an example and their view of football. They don't view it as a sport. We view it as a driver for unity and for identity. And you see that in the national team. You see that in the diversity that we have across the kingdom. And they all share the passion and love for football. I also want to speak about the culture surrounding football as well, which is what we which is what we're doing at Misk City, and we aim to accomplish, where we have this environment and diverse cultures around the sports facilities. So you would find our sports facility surrounded by creative studios, as well as content creators, manga studios. With the right infrastructure, everything comes together, and then you have a culture at its best when it comes to football.
Yeah, I was just going to add on to your point there. I think, utilizing players and their profiles and their brands is such a huge part of that piece, because players themselves are the ones that connect with fans, So if they're able to show their identity off the pitch as well as on the pitch, that's how they engage people. And you're seeing now so many different brand activations with clubs, for example, with Labrum at Arsenal, bringing in the West African and African diaspora kind of fashion and culture elements into the game. So you start to bring other stakeholders to the table as well that don't necessarily think that, or hadn't really partnered with football previously, but have an avenue now to reach a wider audience. So I think that part of it is increasingly powerful. But football clubs themselves, they have the talent there. It's about harnessing that talent and empowering those players to recognize the platforms they have and actually the reach they have as well within their own communities.
I love that. I think my next question, I can definitely start with you, talking about like the foundation and just physical and mental health of athletes. I want to know if we feel we've perfected to train the body, are we forgetting also to protect the person, the athlete themselves?
I think you are right, because we have been very good at improving the performance, but we often forget about the person who is behind the athlete. And that's probably a big problem in soccer. We sometimes focus on just performance. We don't care about mental health issues, and at the end, that's taking care of the players is what really sustains the game. And quite often we forget about that. Luckily, things are changing now. Probably you have experience in your career, but I've seen that now we are more concerned about this issue, and most of our players have psychological support, and particularly after injuries. When we had an ACL tear, in the past, we just used to treat the knee. We forgot about what happened in the player's head, all the concerns, all the fear, and now we know it. It's really, really important. I don't know if you have experience. I know that you had some injuries in the past, and do you think this has changed?
No, I think it has changed significantly, and it's something that most clubs and managers and coaches embrace now. However, I think it's one of those things when we talk about mental health and well-being, that it just needs to be part of the pie from the beginning, from the outset. It needs to be part of the foundation to begin with. So we focus on, physical abilities. We focus on tactical, technical, and recovery as well, recuperation. But well-being should also be part of that foundational basis that we start from. Because as you mentioned there, Dr. Manuel, we often focus on it post the player's injury. Now we're factoring psychological help and support. But can we be a bit more proactive, I think, across the sport? I think we could probably still be more proactive to allow, to cultivate environments where players can sort of be more vulnerable and talk about kind of the challenges they have. And that's not just related to injuries, that's related to how they deal with pressure, how they deal with stress, how they deal with, big kind of ambitions they have within their career, rather than kind of those who can fight through it, get there, and those who can't kind of disappear or struggle or tail off. I think we can probably do more in those spaces. But as you said there, in terms of, ACL injuries, I've had two, and I had two 10 years apart from each other. So I know during that time, I personally didn't get like any kind of professional support in that, especially the first time I did it. I had to rely heavily on myself to get to my appointments, to rely on teammates, to, get through the recovery process, to ask people about what they went through and what the best advice was. Thankfully, that has changed significantly. But like I said, I think, the challenges I had 15 years ago are very different to the challenges of the modern day footballer, because now they don't just have what's always existed in the game, the pressure to perform, the stress of, competition, the stress of competing for your shirt in your team. They've also got to deal with social media and the constant scrutiny and the intrusion and at times the abuse as well. So we're having to find, I think, more proactive measures to support them in managing all the external factors as well as the internal ones that happen in their day-to-day environment.
I think we see the power of social with this. We were speaking about this earlier as well. Fans can be so hard on players if they're not their best. It's becoming more open to speak about mental health, but that power of social, of players representing on and off the pitch, just being who they are and honest and developing that fan connection, maybe this creates a little bit of a safer place for that foundation of mental and physical health.
Yes, well, well-being is the enabler that will make you achieve what you want to achieve. And at least in our ecosystem, we view players, and that's very important, and talents as a whole human being, emotionally, physically, and cognitive. So it's not just about their talent, it's not just about what they do on the pitch. And that's very important because we have sometimes we have no idea what they go through, what feedback they get, their exposure to social media, their exposure in home, in school, and etc. So if you have the right foundation, if you have the needed knowledge for these talents, what it means to be a professional, what it means to take good care of yourself emotionally and physically, then you maximize the opportunity for them to be a professional or to achieve. They don't have to be a professional even, but they just have to excel in whatever they do. And what's interesting is that this applies to almost all sectors, all aspects. It's not just purely about sport. And now I believe just going back to social media, the exposure to social media, and when you see young talents get exposed to various comments, content. It's very important to learn how to deal with that and when to basically isolate yourselves from the content you're being exposed to and when to respond. And we've seen some experienced players perhaps post a tweet or an Instagram post that is not in the right place, and it directly affects their career and what they do in their career. So I believe that's very, very extremely important. And in Misk City, we look at the city as a whole, as a platform, and we try to maximize well-being in every aspect. For example, we have over 40% of the city just an open space with landscaping, so people can walk around to maximize, obviously, well-being and recreation. So it goes beyond building the physical place. It goes to the infrastructure. It goes to the design of the experience overall.
I feel,
Yeah.
please.
Going back to this holistic approach, when we used to do surgery on ACL, we found that 95% of the players went back to play, but only 65 to 70 went back to their previous level. And we found a correlation between the level of play with the fear they have. So now, once they have the injury, they pass a fear test. And those that score very high in fear, we have to work much harder on the psychological aspect. Otherwise, they won't be able to perform. And that's something we have just found. In the past, we didn't take care about that. And that could explain why they never went back to the level. So it's very important, as you all mentioned, the holistic approach to the person, not only to the injury.
I feel social media can play a piece in that as well, the fear aspect.
Yeah.
Yeah, that leads to my next question. Regarding how football DNA is changing, I think social does play a huge piece in this. How do we make sure new formats, technologies, and fan cultures still serve the essence of the game? I'm starting with you.
Yeah, I'll take it. Yeah, well, for me, I think, you have to accept the inevitable anyway. We're developing all the time as a society with technology and new formats and new kind of entities, and that is part of kind of human evolution in a way. But I think ultimately, I think it's important that technology connects people even further and not become just a distraction for people and entertainment and sport. And in terms of new formats, I think what's really important is to understand the way that people engage with sport today isn't necessarily how people engage with sport 50 years ago. So you're also catering to the needs of new kind of followers and new fans who are coming into the game. And I can talk on this from a broadcast perspective. We have a platform like BBC that's existed since the end of time. I grew up on it, my parents have grown up on it, my grandparents. But my younger sister and the next generation aren't watching BBC anymore. They're engaging on YouTube and online platforms and other things. And that is not going to be the kind of viewership for the next 50 years that will sustain a broadcasting platform like potentially BBC. So it's about being innovative and finding new ways to engage people whilst keeping the integrity of the sport alive. And I think, new formats is just another entity like World Sevens, which is a 7v7 tournament for elite women's clubs. Another opportunity for players to play on the biggest platform, as well as be able to drive their own profiles, to drive the brand of the club further afield globally and engage new audiences. But I think we want to do with this tournament is touch different places in the world and not just be, all concentrated, particularly in Europe or particularly in North America, that eventually this tournament will expand and be able to showcase out of Africa, showcase out of South Africa, Southeast Asia, and expose more young women and girls a kind of a pathway to, whether it's elite sport or just the enjoyment of football, those opportunities.
Well, I think football is art, and we always try to scientify this art, which is fine. But I think we have to be very careful when it comes to new technologies and not just adapt new technologies for the sake of adapting them, to see how they fit our context and serve our purpose. And we've seen this perhaps in the recent technologies that were introduced in football. So you match these innovations with the right infrastructure and the good foundation that you have with any talent, you will get good results versus just adapting any new technology. But I think it's very important to leave football as an art form as well. because this is the beauty of football. Okay, we understand that there are a lot of elements that get changed. We understand that there are certain ways to do certain things that we have learned throughout history, and this is great to learn from, but the art aspects remain very, very, very strong.
I love that.
Can I just say, sorry, one of the things that we wanted to do from the player council at World Sevens was come from a player perspective. And I grew up playing street football. I grew up playing in football courts, five-a-side, all of that stuff. And that's where I developed my skill. That's where I developed how to use my body, evade pressure, tackles, things like that, because it was fast, it was dynamic, it was engaging. And so from this perspective, we were saying that we wanted to give elite footballers the platform again to feel that enjoyment, that fun aspect of not just the performance side where everything is results-led. You know, that is part of the carrot, but the other part is that they can express themselves in a completely different kind of fashion as well within this format.
I want to close out with this. If football were being reinvented today from scratch, what would each of you do differently?
Okay. So I think that if I invented football, the patient well-being would be unnegotiable. I mean, even if we have to change some existing rules, like for instance, football is the only team sport where substitutions are limited. In basketball, handball, rugby, you can change players as many times as you want. And by changing players, you decrease fatigue, you decrease injury risk, and probably you will increase the length of the career. So even if you have to change some rules that exist, I think it is important to protect the player. And we are seeing, every year we're seeing more and more injuries than the year before. So I think something should be done.
Yeah, I was going to come from a philosophical perspective, but I let Dr. Manuel take the rules because you're coming from the medical science point of view, which I think is super important. But I think for me that football would be built with everybody in mind. So you start with the people first, and then you go with purpose and harness potential, and you could execute it with passion. So, you know, for me it's about, you think about the people that find it the hardest to move through the world. And that's anyone who has a disability, struggles to do anything in their life. If you built something with them in mind first, it always benefits everybody else. So that's how I would redesign football. And then I would take it one step further and say, well, what ties us to football is the emotional connection we have to the sport, the passion, the way it makes us feel alive. Well, football could power so much more. They could almost be like community hubs for every area they, you know, work within to support education, health, wealth, all of that stuff.
I like your question. It's like asking about the future without mentioning future. So I believe that the future of football should be designed, not just played. And this includes grassroots, tournaments, and every aspect in a way to make it or to have a human-centric approach to obviously maximize well-being, to maximize even the entertainment aspects of football and every other aspect.
Thank you all each so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.